Fire, 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 fire. Now you've heard it. Not shouted in a crowded theatre, admittedly, as I realize I seem now to have shouted it in the Hogwarts dining room. But the point is made. Everyone knows the fatuous verdict of the greatly overpraised Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, who asked for an actual example of when it would be proper to limit speech or define it as an action, gave that of shouting fire in a crowded theatre. It's very often forgotten what he was doing in that case was sending to prison a group of Yiddish-speaking socialists whose literature was printed in a language most Americans couldn't read, opposing President Wilson's participation in the First World War and the dragging of the United States into this sanguinary conflict, which the Yiddish-speaking socialists had fled from Russia to escape. In fact, it could be just as plausibly argued that the Yiddish-speaking socialists who were jailed by the excellent and overpraised Judge Oliver Wendell Holmes were the real firefighters, were the ones who were shouting fire when there really was fire in a very crowded theater.
All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time today. And it is not early as it normally is. The whole family was running behind this morning. And I had an anticipated guest for this afternoon, actually in this same time slot. And so my intention was to get up and just do something small and minor and then let people know, hey, bigger, better podcast episode was coming this afternoon. And then I just had to make, some changes due to all the things that were happening. So here we are, and the show must go on, and it will. Before we get into everything, I just want to remind everybody to like, subscribe, share, let people know what's going on. And, leave me a comment, let me know how I'm doing. So that would be super duper fantastic. All right. So what are we talking about today? So I'm going to do my best to weave together like multiple stories here. And it's under the premise that our freedom of speech is under attack. And we need to be mindful about how we approach any limitations on that. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, you're a libertarian. Aren't you a free speech absolutist? And the answer is, I am a free speech absolutist when people want to say things true or untrue. It's necessary because many of those things seemed untrue at first, but then they end up being true. Sunlight being a disinfectant and whatnot. Bomb threats and other kind of direct threats to somebody's safety, they don't fit that category. And then people who make them should be punished. And it's interesting because there were recently some bomb threats being made. What city was that? I don't remember now, but there was yeah. Springfield. Bomb threats in Springfield. And, a lot of people were like, oh man, all these bomb threats, this is what our freedom of speech gets us, right? Well, then it turned out, as we found out later, that a lot of those, or maybe even all of those bomb threats were from overseas. So they weren't even in the United States. So it seems like there are some bad actors that are engaging and making it look like Americans are doing things and Americans are all flipping out. And so then the first thing that they rush to do is say, well, we need to limit your freedom of speech. Right. And this is what happens all the time. And so we need to be very, very vigilant. Now, where I'm not an absolutist is when there is an actual violation, a bomb threat or threatening to come over and beat up somebody or come over to their house for whatever. Like those are real threats, and the person that makes them should be punished accordingly. And a lot of times, unfortunately, you have kids who make threats, and the reality is they're being stupid. I mean, there's no other way to explain it. Kids are being stupid. When I was a kid, now I'm 46. When I was a kid, um, we had we probably had a bomb threat at the school maybe once a quarter, maybe. I mean, maybe once, maybe twice a year, something like that. We had a couple bomb threats, and every single time it was some kid being stupid. Sometimes I knew who the kid was, sometimes I didn't. Sometimes they were just being funny, right? And at the time, 15, 16, 17-year-old me, sometimes thought it was funny. Haha, we get out of class. Oh, we're going to go stand outside. There's no real bomb threat, blah, 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 right? And we thought it was funny and maybe annoying. Depends on who you were. Some kids were more studious. They were prepared to take their tests and they weren't interested in all these silly little games. Other of us were, maybe we're hanging out with the wrong crowd, being stupid, whatever. So we thought it was kind of funny. And now I've never made one myself. That wasn't really my thing, but I did laugh about it and I thought it was kind of funny. But here's the thing. The issue is those kids should be punished, or anybody that makes a threat, because at the end of the day, if you call in a bomb threat, if you threaten to shoot up a school, if you threaten to come over to somebody's house and beat them up, there is a good chance that the likelihood, let me put it this way, the likelihood is that you may not immediately be able to tell if that person is being serious or not. So therefore, you need to treat it as serious. Because if you don't and they are serious, then the obvious ramifications happen, right? And so we do need to treat these things appropriately. But that's the problem. That's where we're going astray in society. And the truth is that when people are punished for doing things that are actually that are actual crimes, right? They should be punished according to their age and cognitive ability, and that should be and the punishment should be proportionally applied, considering those and considering the impact of the resources. So, for instance, if somebody online says, "DL, I'm coming to your house and I'm going to attack you. I'm coming after you. You better watch out," right? Whatever crazy thing they say. And let's say that it's not some rando account, that has like 2 followers, right? Let's say that it's a account that looks to be kind of legitimate, like it's an actual person. Maybe I've engaged with them before, right? We'll just kind of make up a scenario here. And so I might say, man, I think this threat might be kind of credible. I probably should, maybe call the police. So I might call the police and say, hey, somebody's made a threat against me and my family, blah, blah, blah. We'll send an officer over. So they send an officer over. I give them the information. They investigate and they find out, maybe it's some kid in California. Okay. Well, the kid in California or his parents, however you want to look at it, should be responsible for the resources that were spent to deal with this. Now, if the kid was just running his mouth, we find out that there's no other evidence that he is an actual threat. Like he hasn't been in trouble with the law before. He's never had, maybe he doesn't, maybe there's no firearms even in the house, right? Like whatever. Like we find out and say, yep, we feel confident that this kid was just running his mouth. Well, then our punishment needs to be proportionate to that. And the reason for that is because when it's not, we start applying almost like a zero tolerance policy toward everything. And from my perspective, that's when we start having a lot of problems. So I want you to think about zero tolerance policies. Think about bullying. They have zero tolerance. I remember a few schools that I went to, and they had zero tolerance policies. And in those schools, you would get in trouble if you were fighting or if you were doing certain things. And most of the time, the person that got in trouble was not necessarily the person that was causing trouble, because the person that was causing trouble was being clever about how they did it. And so they ended up getting away with it quite a bit. I remember it happening. And I remember seeing people, friends of mine and myself, a time or two get in trouble for retaliating against some bully, acting like a fool, causing problems. And then I was the one, or my friends, or somebody I knew, or just, some other kid. They were the ones to get in trouble. And that's where what we get with these zero tolerances, because the zero tolerances, well, the people who are just responding in kind, or the people that are maybe not really thinking it through, they're not putting any effort into getting away with it. Whereas the actual bullies, the actual people that are trying to do harm, they're, and I played this video before in one of my past episodes. If you remember, I think it was the 2015 video Bully. There was a film crew, and they went out, and I think they watched like 5 different kids in like 5 different cities, or maybe it was 3 different kids in 3 different cities. But they went out and they just recorded these kids and the bullies, and then they recorded, the interactions between the kids and the teachers and stuff like that. And so this one kid who was being bullied, he was the victim. He lashed out in some way. I don't remember what he did, but he lashed out in some way, and he ended up in the principal's office. And so the camera's on them, and it's the principal's talking, and he's like, "Look, you didn't do anything the last time so and so was picking on me." He's like, that's kind of like his justification. Now the kid's like 14, okay? And he's like, "You didn't do anything last time." And she's like, "Well, how do you know I didn't do anything?" She's like, "As a matter of fact, I actually did." She said, "The last time he was bullying you, he sat on your head." And she's like, "Did he sit on your head again?" And the kid said something that I will never forget. Okay. He said, in a very quiet, hushed tone, he said, "No, but he did other stuff." And that's the problem. That right there explains, does it explain? It really describes how we approach bad actors in the realm of free speech. So, what are we talking about today? I saw something pop up in the news. Apparently, an 11-year-old child was perp walked in Volusia County, and this kid, he was on like some sort of FaceTime or something with some friends. I think, I'm not really sure. I was trying to find the details specifically of what was the interaction that he was having, but I could not find those interaction. I did see some post that suggested that he was being bullied and that this was his response. I don't really know if that's true or not. But he was on a video call with some friends or some kids, and he had indicated that he had a hit list of kids' names. And then he showed like all these weapons at his house. And the Volusia police went and arrested him and perp walked him. They are going to charge him with a felony, because he documented. I'm not sure if it was just the video or if he documented it on paper or exactly the details. I haven't seen the specific police report just yet, but they are accusing him of documenting, um, being ready and willing to commit an act of violence in school, possibly a mass shooting. And so when they arrested him, there's video footage of all this stuff that they found at his house. Most of it is, there are no firearms, but there were, uh, like pellet guns, and then there were some knives and swords, which kind of look like collector edition type stuff. Which is interesting because when I was a kid, when I was like 14, 15, I was really, really into knives and ninja stuff. And so if you would come into my bedroom, you would have found all kind of like daggers and swords and knives and, blades of all kind. Like I just had, for some reason, I was into it. That was my thing at the time. So I, I just had this collection of them. Right. And so they perp walk this kid, and you could watch the video. It's online. You can go to YouTube and you can watch their video. But I was watching the press conference from the Volusia County sheriff, and I was struck by a few things. So let me play this clip of him, and then we're gonna start tying some of this stuff together as best as I can. We'll see if I can tie it together and make sense of these different stories and why we need to be vigilant about our First Amendment. So here's this video.
Oh, this is absolutely out of control, and it ends now. Parents, do your job. Don't let Sheriff Chitwood raise your kids. Go talk to the families who have lost a loved one in a school shooting. These little knuckleheads think it's funny. Go talk to those parents and see how funny this is.
Okay, so let's pause right here. In a sense, I agree with him. If like I have a 5-year-old, If I find out that, he goes to an elementary school, so there are kids that are older than 5 years old there. So if there's like a 10-year-old kid that's making threats, I'm going to be concerned. On the other hand, I'm also going to remember he's 10, right? And this kid was 11. Okay. That's very important. And we're going to we're going to look at some more details about that in just a moment. But the idea that an 11-year-old boy thinks things are funny that he ought not think are funny, it should not be surprising to anybody. That is very normal. Even terrible things, right? Young teenage boys laugh about things that are terrible that I would never laugh. Like if my 11-year-old son, when my son is 11, there will likely be a time where I reprimand him for laughing about something that should not be seen as funny. Why is that? Because he is immature and I am not. Also, by the way, I don't think it's appropriate for a sheriff to come out and start calling kids knuckleheads or any names, which we'll see in a moment, for doing things that are actually kind of normal. So, like, again, laughing and making jokes about things are normal. That doesn't necessarily mean we should tolerate it. We should just recognize this is not out of the ordinary. And we need to level set our own expectations. My expectation is that my son one day will probably laugh about something and I'll have to reprimand him and sit him down and say, son, this is why it's not funny. Now, I'm not going to be shocked and like, I can't believe my little Zach said that. Why? I'm not going to be freaked out about it. I'm just going to be like, look, son, this is why it's not funny. And let's have a conversation. And the reason is because I'm the mature one. He is not. In fact, at 11, you still have like what, over 10 years of maturing to do at a minimum. At a minimum. Like at 21, he'll still be immature, right? At 25, he'll still have some level of immaturity. Now, somewhere about there, as we go along, we should see in a development of maturity. So when he's 21, he should certainly not be acting in the same way as when he was 11, right? But again, he's 10 years early on being mature at least. Let's continue watching this guy.
It's not, we're going to come and get you and we're going to put you out for public embarrassment. And I know of a set of parents right now that they're looking at $11,000 each because somebody's paying this bill.
Okay. So what bill is he talking about? He's going to get into it in just a moment. So this bill is the resources that are that had to go toward the different threats and things that they had to respond to. And there's a certain fairness there. Like if your child, calls in a bomb threat and the school has to be evacuated, and then the police had to respond. They had to maybe bring in the dogs and, maybe they brought in a bomb squad to verify, because your average everyday officer isn't going to be able to necessarily identify and ensure that when they say it's all clear, it's all clear. So I certainly understand this, and I don't necessarily have a problem with punishing people. However, again, I think we need to level set and make sure that we understand what is normal. And when I say normal, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's okay. That just means what is not out of the ordinary. And I'm 46. 30 years ago, kids were making bomb threats. They were making threats to the entire school, and they thought it was funny. And probably before that. This is not a new thing. And we need to keep that in mind. We need to remember these kind of, like yesterday, it was bomb threats. Today, it's I'll shoot up the school. And again, we're talking about immature kids. Okay, so let's continue.
Today is September 13th, and we're not having a good day in Volusia County. So far, 54 tips have come in through Fortify, Florida, talking about school shootings. All of them have been deemed bogus.
Okay, so we've got a tip line. People call in and say, hey, there's this thing. I've got some evidence or whatever. I don't know. I don't know what evidence. The thing I want to ask, and I would love to hear from Sheriff Chitwood here, is were any of those false accusations? Did he go after people that might be calling in and saying, hey, I heard so-and-so is going to do this, or I heard this, and then they really didn't, right? Because those people are guilty as well. If I call the police and I say, hey, man, there's Haitians outside grabbing all the geese and they're cutting their heads off. And then the police rush over here and they find out there's not even a black person in sight, and there are no dead geese lying around. And I have no video footage. I have no camera footage. And, maybe through the course of the conversation, I just admit, I made it all up, or I don't really have the evidence, or I thought I saw it. Maybe I should be punished as well for the resources that were involved. Maybe our citizens need to, before we start setting up hotlines for them to call on each other, maybe they need to be told, don't call unless it's credible. Here are the things that you can do to make sure that it's credible so that you're not wasting our resources because you're a nincompoop. So I don't know all 54 of these calls. I don't know anything about them. I just know that they were made, and of course they do have to respond to them. But in the same way that they may say, that someone might say, hey, this kid's threatening to shoot up the school, and they go deal with the kid that's, that's potentially going to shoot up the school, or at least saying that, then they also need to address people that are calling in and making claims that are either outright false, or they're just jumping the gun and making a call because they thought they saw something. It's the old Chris Rock joke. Years ago, Chris Rock made a joke, and he said he was making a joke about little old white ladies that would be on the phone and they see a black man walking down the street. They dial 911 and then just wait, right? Like, it's that same notion. You have people that are like, they're on edge. And this is part of the problem. We're on edge. And I'm going to talk about that more in a moment. But we're on edge, and people are calling in for anything and everything. I mean, I just saw a video the other day. I don't know where it was from. Some woman, is like a group of people, but some woman called the police because she was in an argument with whatever restaurant that she was at over whether or not she had to, because I think they bought like a all you can eat buffet for one person, but they let somebody else eat off of it. And the restaurant was like, well, no, that person's going to have to pay for their own dish. And the people were arguing with the restaurant whether or not the details of the menu specified that they couldn't share or something like that. And so they ended up calling the police, and the police came out over that. And then the woman ended up getting arrested because she was too belligerent when the police were like, but it says this on the menu, right? So people call the police for all kinds of reasons. And we have to be careful. Like this, freedom of speech is paramount, but we cannot just narrowly focus on who we don't like using it. Let's continue.
We have 2 people in custody. We have another person who we're investigating and probably will take into custody. I can't say this clear. You don't stand up on an airplane and yell hijack. You don't walk into a movie theater and yell fire. And you don't get online and post that you're going to shoot up a school.
Okay. So I don't know that this kid went online and did it. My understanding is that he, that this was through the course of a video call. Whatever. Like, that's, I'm just clarifying here. I don't think that Sheriff Chitwood needs to be hammered for that particular, but he does need to be hammered over his use of yelling fire in a crowded theater, because he's wrong, as the very clip at the beginning with Christopher Hitchens eloquently points out. And what Justice Holmes was doing was making an analogy. So when he said you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, he wasn't saying that as a matter of law or else. He was making a reference to something else. He was like, well, the reason I'm making this judgment is because like this, you cannot do this. But the fact of the matter is, if I go to a movie theater and there is a fire, I can yell fire. Also, if I reasonably believe there is a fire, I can yell fire. So imagine I go to a movie theater, I'm in there, I step out, and I'm going to the bathroom. And as I'm coming out, maybe somewhere, one of the signs or something has smoke coming out of it. or I see some smoke somewhere, and I yell, "Hey, I think there's a fire," right? Alerting people. Like, I'm not going to get and I'm not a lawyer, but the likelihood of me getting arrested is really low because I can demonstrate that I believed there might be a fire and I was trying to warn people that there might be a fire. Now, how do libertarians handle this whole situation? Like fire and all that? That's a good question. So let's talk about that real quick. At the end of the day, when I go to a movie theater to watch a movie, I am paying money to the movie theater. And in exchange, that movie theater gives me a ticket. And that ticket says, you have paid us money. You are now permitted to sit in this seat and watch this film. And that film, they pay somebody else. They pay the movie production film, the film companies. They pay them a certain amount of money to be able to play the movie, right? And this is how it works. So if you come in and you yell fire because you want to be funny, and we all make a dash out of there, well, now you have interfered with the transaction that I made with the movie theater. So now I should have a claim against you. The movie theater should have a claim against you because now they have to deal with the fact that a lot of their customers are very angry for having been told there was a fire when there wasn't and ruined their movie experience. Their customers are probably going to get pissed off. They're going to want to go home. They'll probably want a refund, right? They may even want more than that. They may say, hey, you need to compensate me extra since you couldn't keep this place in order, so on and so forth, right? So the reality is he's dead wrong. You can yell fire in a theater. There might be ramifications if you're lying. And libertarians in a libertarian utopia would also have ramifications for it. But we also recognize that this notion that, oh, you just can't yell fire in a theater, that is probably one of the most abused statements about law ever. And I'm no lawyer. I'm not a legal person. Just as much as I've seen, that seems to be the most common idea or notion that people get wrong. And here we have a sheriff that gets it wrong. Now he's not a lawyer, he's not a judge, but he does enforce the law. So he kind of should have an idea about when he's speaking in legal terms, whether he's speaking factually or not. So let's continue. And let's see here. This is very good. I'm actually going to time surfing alien says sheriff needs to behave a bit more professional and cut out the cursing. I actually agree. And I'm going to get to something here in just a moment that he said that I really didn't like.
It's going to get your ass sent to jail. And now for you parents out there, today's hoax cost around $21,000. There's 2 people in custody. We're coming after you.
Okay. He's basically making a threat. He's threatening the public, right? He doesn't need to do that. And I know this is very common. They might, they get out there and they'll say, hey, click at our ticket. If you're not wearing a seatbelt, we're getting you. We're going to do DUI stops. If you're drinking, we're busting you. I get it. But honestly, everybody in the United States knows exactly what police do, right? We know that your job is to go out there and look for people that are breaking the law and then do something about it. Whether you write them a ticket, you arrest them, you shoot them and their dog, right? Whatever the case is, whatever you feel that, is necessary so that you can maintain law and order and puff your chest up. That's what police do. We're all aware of this. No, nobody's confused. You don't need to come out and threaten us. You just need to say, like, look, like word will get out. Like word, like the news media, people on social media will figure this out and will communicate that information out. We'll say, man, they're busting people left and right down in Volusia County. There, kids keep calling in bomb threats and they're arresting them and throwing them in jail and all this crap. Like, you don't need to make threats. We know exactly what you do. We'll figure it out. That's so, in my opinion, more so. And again, I'm still not done with addressing his language. More so than just his language, he needs to just shut up. I mean, there's no nice way to say it. And I know he won't like it if he were to ever hear this. And he'll be like, I'm here to enforce the law. Like, well, you're going beyond that. You're threatening citizens. And the question is, are you equally threatening other citizens when they are engaging in behaviors that cost the city money? Are you coming out and saying, hey, this costs this much money. You have to pay for that. Because that's the government's job. The government's job is to treat people equally. So if he's decided that he's going to pick a particular area for which he is going to decide to hammer against, then I would say that he's wrong. But there's even more to that. Like, you can argue with me on that, and that's fine. I think there's more to that. So let's continue.
And starting Monday, your little cherub, we're going to start.
Okay, so there we go again with this, your little cherub. So, what? I'm just going to try to, can I pull it up here? So let's see. Let's see if I can just put this up on the screen. Let me see if, did I ever get it? For some reason, this image was not working. Let me do this really, really quickly here. And I think I can show it on the screen. Let's see here. Let's see, where are you? Where did I go? Okay, give me just a second here. And we're going to, I will put this up. For some reason, this particular image was not cooperating. So we will do something else to make it cooperate. And so here we are. There we go. Perfect. All right. We're almost there. Give me just one more second, folks. All right. So right there. Okay. So this is from a news article. So this is what he said at one point. He said, Chitwood at least has had enough. Quote, for the little bastards out there who think this is funny, ha, 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 you want to get on social media. You ain't that smart. You're getting caught, end quote. That's what he said. So again, we're talking about 11-year-old children who have an inappropriate sense of humor. And this man, who is supposed to be maintaining order, protecting citizens, at least that's what citizens believe, okay? Citizens believe that the police are out there to protect us. He's decided to use all kind of negative language about 11-year-old children who are being stupid. And don't get me wrong. The kid was being stupid at a minimum. Now, if there's credible evidence that he really meant it, that's an entirely different story. But at a minimum, he was being stupid. So while we're on this, let's read. I got Parents magazine pulled up because I was curious. I was like, I got a 5-year-old. I don't have an 11-year-old just yet. So I'm like, what should I expect as far as his development level is concerned? So let's take a look. I'm going to zoom in on this so you guys can see it. So it says the tween years are upon you, and with them, some opportunities and challenges arise as a parent. Hanging out with your 11-year-old can be fun as they're starting to understand the world and converse like many adults. However, the intensity and the drama of a preteen can be frustrating and difficult for a parent to handle. From the complex social dynamics at school to the physical changes that can confuse and embarrass a tween, here's what to expect from an 11-year-old. Language and cognitive milestones. Younger children tend to live in the moment and focus on what affects them right here and right now. Around age 11, they start to realize that the choices they make could now have long-term effects. So they start to realize it. They haven't figured it out yet. Tweens, let's skip down. Where are we going to go? 11-year-olds are also realizing that there are multiple ways to look at a piece of information, situation, or issue, and they start to understand that there's a gray area where there was previously only black and white. They're realizing, they're starting. This is where it begins effectively, right? All right. So let's see what we got here. Some milestones. Boys often enter puberty later, around age 12, but it's not unheard of for them to start it at 11. Let's see. No, we want to skip the physical stuff. Where was it? Oh, here we go. Social and emotional milestones. That's what I wanted. All right. While many 11-year-olds still accept family beliefs and recognize adults as authority figures, this is also the time they begin to question authority and might have their first introduction to risky behaviors such as drinking, smoking, or self-harm. Due to hormonal changes and additional challenges, this age group shows mood swings, low self-esteem, depression, and aggression, says Dr. Gott. Let's see. What else did I want to read here? Oh, yeah, let's continue. While friendship has long been important to your child, it now becomes vital for better or for worse. The idea of group identity starts to play a role, and the tight-knit cliques can form. Peer pressure starts to influence your child into doing things that they probably wouldn't do on their own. The child is torn between family rules and peer pressure and the desire to be obedient or to be cool and challenge authority, explains Dr. Gott. All right. So let's see. Is there any more? I think that was basically it. So basically, what we're reading here is we're finding out that an 11-year-old is entering puberty and they're having all these hormonal changes, which causes them to do things that they might not otherwise do, or to explore the world in ways that we won't necessarily like. They're challenging authority. They're maybe aggressive. Maybe they're laughing at things that they shouldn't laugh at, right? Like my 5-year-old, if he sees I don't know, a bunny being hurt, he will probably be upset about it. When he's 11 or 12, because of the changes that are occurring, he might find it funny, right? Like that's possible. He might think of something as funny that he shouldn't, that he wouldn't have today, right? You know, and so the point here that I'm making is that when we have our law enforcement out there protecting us, so we believe, it is on us as citizens to ensure that they are keeping in mind who they're dealing with. Now, I want you to remember, in the past, I have told this story, and I'm not going to tell it again right now. I'm just going to kind of give you a brief rundown. In the past, I have told the story about how I went out and I spoke with officers at a coffee with a cop here in Jacksonville, and they told me that most interactions between citizens and police end up without any kind of violence or, you know, altercation. Okay, great. Now you need to remember that. But more importantly, how many more interactions, that's adults they're talking about primarily, right? How many more interactions will you have with an 11-year-old child that would end up being a nothing burger? Now, we're all afraid, sort of, right? We're all concerned. Will my kid's school be shot up next? Right? And I get it, but we cannot let that lingering fear drive us to be stupid, because our children are depending on us to be the rational adults. And we have to learn to distinguish when a child is being stupid and when they're actually are a real threat. And unless this, and so far as I can tell, like the kid said it was a joke, which they all do, right? Like every kid will say it's a joke. Most of them will probably mean it. Some of them maybe not so much. Okay. But when I say some of them, like a very small percentage of them. Okay. So let's go back to this video here. Hopefully I didn't lose my place. If not, we'll find it again. So let's go back.
Oh, this is absolutely out of control, and it ends
hold
now.
on. So we'll get back to where I was. Luckily, I remembered where we were.
Custody. And then we're going to show pictures of you, the parents, because you don't want to raise your kid. Sheriff Chitwood's going to raise them.
Okay. So full stop. Now, here's the funny part. I've seen a lot of people praising this man. They're like, "Oh yeah, he should," you know, and they enjoy the video of the 11-year-old, you know, being perp walked, and I'm like, "The hell is wrong with you people? You're enjoying this? Like you find this entertaining?" And the 11-year-old is the one we're calling immature. You're laughing and thinking this is funny and this is great. That 11-year-old was perp walked, and you think this is great. And then here we are. We've got this guy saying, "I will raise your kids if you don't." Sir, that is not your damn job. Your job is not to raise kids. Your job is not to threaten adults. Your job is not to threaten the public. That is not your job. You have exceeded your authority. And I don't give a damn about your badge. And I would say it to his face if he showed up at my door. I would say, "Look, your badge, that doesn't give you the right to say that you're going to raise somebody else's kid. Your job, your only job, is to enforce the law. And the way in which you do it can and should be criticized. And we should absolutely criticize him when he is suggesting that he's going to do something and get praised by the same Republican crowd, the same conservative crowd. I'm presuming. I'm making a presumption there because there were so many people, and I'm not seeing people on the right criticize him so much. So he's being praised by this crowd for talking about raising children, being praised by the same people who once upon a time went and took over school boards because they didn't want the schools raising their kids. How is it any different that a school says, Come to us. Tell us your pronouns. We won't tell your parents. It's okay. How is that any different from an officer saying, I'll raise your kids if you don't? Sir, your job is not to raise our kids. Now, if my kid happens to be doing something wrong and it's within the purview of your responsibility to address it, then fine. And the way that you address it, I will have words to say about it. And this whole thing is precipitated on, we're talking about an 11-year-old. How many 11-year-olds are shooting up schools? Now, I get it. A lot of the kids are like older, right? They're like in their 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, in that more high school range. But, and so the idea is like, oh, maybe we're getting this one sooner before he becomes that crazed killer. Maybe, or maybe you're just playing the zero tolerance game and you're getting the kid that happened to be stupid enough to put it out there for everybody to see. Because remember, we're not seeing these kind of things necessarily from the actual killers. Like they're like, or we do see them and then they get investigated and then we disregard all the actual real warning signs. Like, hey, this kid was hospitalized. Hey, this kid, not hospitalized, but I mean like, they were put into a mental institution, right? They, here in Florida, we call it Baker acted, right? Like, oh, this kid once was Baker acted. Oh, this kid was making a lot of threats. And the teachers were saying like they were kind of afraid of him. And then nobody did anything about it. And then you have this kid, this 11-year-old kid who does something entirely stupid. And there doesn't appear, at least that's not what I'm hearing from this officer, the sheriff, there doesn't appear to be any effort to say, here is how we determined that this kid was an actual threat versus somebody being stupid. So they're throwing the book at a kid that's being stupid. And guess what? The real kid who might actually want to do people harm is paying attention. All right, don't do that. That gets you caught. Right? And so now he or she is going to fly under the radar because they're not dumb, right? They may be immature, but they're not entirely stupid. Just like the bully who changes their behavior after they get caught, we should expect that somebody who really means harm will adjust their behavior so that they don't get caught because they have a goal in mind. They want to harm people. Let's continue watching this guy.
So be ready to handle what's about to come down starting Monday. We've had 207 school threats since school has started. That is unacceptable. We've had 7 in custody. We had somebody try to bring a gun into a football game. This is not a joke. You think it's a joke, you're going to find your ass in handcuffs, and you're going to find your ass being paraded out in front of the news media behind me, and your parents are going to be filmed as they come to pick you up. So parents, get your kids in line, or your checkbook's going to hurt, your pride's going to hurt. I promise.
Okay. So he's a tyrant, plain and simple. That's what he is. Because he needs to, and I don't want to repeat myself. I feel like I'm starting to repeat myself. He's a tyrant. We'll leave it at that. Okay. Now, should kids do all these things? No, they shouldn't. Here's my response. I'm gonna read you the response that I made on social media about this fellow. So let me see here. Where are we? Because I had some words to say about him, and I think it's worth reading. I said, only law enforcement is allowed to make public threats. Am I right, Tyrant Sheriff Chitwood? Should children threaten to shoot up schools? Absolutely not. Should there be repercussions when it happens? Definitely. Should sheriffs threaten the public while making false legal claims? Yelling fire in a theater is not itself a crime. Absolutely not. Not every stupid kid that makes a threat or says something foolish is the next school shooter. In fact, most aren't, and they should be dealt with proportionate to their crime and their maturity. This attitude is exactly why police are overly aggressive, shoot dogs like they're high school students, and kill Americans instead of de-escalating situations. As I keep saying, Florida is a police state, and the sheriff exemplifies that. Sheriff Chitwood hides behind a badge and his authority because he apparently is incapable of dealing with the public in any way other than force and threats. Volusia, and this is where I get a little spicy, Volusia would be safer if he fell down a flight of stairs. And I kind of mean that. Also, I'm kind of being hyperbolic, poking the bear a little bit. Because I'm like, look, freedom of speech is absolutely important in this society. Because when we don't value it, then what happens? Well, we're seeing what happens. If we're willing to perp walk an 11-year-old for saying something stupid, what does that mean for somebody that is maybe creating a real threat? What lengths are we willing to go? Because you can't make the argument that perp walking a kid that was being stupid and perp walking a kid who is actually making a real threat are going to achieve the same results for both of them. You can't do that. There has to be, we have to recognize that both of them need to be treated differently because one is a real threat, one is not. That's how we need. And if we're willing to do that with our 11-year-olds, what are we willing to do with our adults? Well, let's take a look. Because as it turns out, now this is the part of the show where things are going to get really interesting, and people may disagree with me, and I'm okay with that. So let me show you a tweet that popped up. I didn't see it until I heard about it later. So here's a tweet from my brothers and sisters up in New Hampshire. All right. So here's what they said. Anyone who murders Kamala Harris would be an American hero. Okay. Now they're being hyperbolic. How do I know that? Because I follow them. I know who most of them are. And I think the person who tweeted this, Jeremy Kaufman, who I believe, I'm pretty sure he's the one that tweeted this from the account. I know him to be hyperbolic to make points. Now, a lot of people will say, well, DL, like they're literally calling for, someone to murder Kamala Harris. And the truth is, it's not really what it is. It's a fine line for sure. And it's not a tweet I would ever put out, nor is it one that I would have retweeted myself. In fact, I actively object to tweets just like this. However, it is freedom of speech, whether we like it or not. We have the freedom of speech to say, man, I hope you die. Right. And it's unpleasant. It's not nice. We should do better, but we have that. And we need to recognize that freedom of speech is only valuable if we're applying it to speech that we dislike. Now, again, if it's a credible threat, if LPNH got on there and said, we will pay somebody money to do this, to go and harm somebody else. Well, now that's different. That becomes, something that's more actionable. People might believe that, right? Like, oh, they really want someone to do this. They're trying to hire an assassin. But saying it in the way that they did, it is free speech, and we should not forget that. So here's what happens when we don't respect free speech. So here's this video here. Let's see. There you are. And I'm not going to play the whole video. I'll just play a little bit of it for you.
Hey, how can I help you? Yeah. Who are you?
Major O'Donnell with the FBI.
Can you give your full name, please?
Major O'Donnell with the FBI.
Is that sufficient to identify as only one O'Donnell affiliated with the FBI?
In New Hampshire.
Could you please state your full name, sir?
Could you please stop recording?
No. It's First Amendment right. Okay. What's your name, sir?
Okay, so I want to stop and I want to point out, number one, you have the right. He's correct. You have the First Amendment right to record the police. And you should. Because as you can see, these two gentlemen walked up and they're not wearing body cams. So let's assume that these aren't just your clerical guys, which they probably are. I don't know. But let's assume that these guys, they've got their badges, they've got their guns, and they could arrest somebody on the spot. Let's just assume that would happen. I assume that all FBI agents can. I don't know much about the FBI, but I assume there are some desk workers that get tossed out and told, you go and do this. You go out and ask some questions, right? Like they have to go do the footwork or whatever. So they come out and let's say they ended up arresting somebody, Mr. Kaufman here. Well, without video footage, it becomes their word against his. And because of his wild tweet, the evidence is stacked against him. So therefore, you should videotape police as often as you can. And remember, it is your First Amendment right. All right, let's continue watching.
Absolutely not. You can show me your name and identification, or I'm going to go back inside my house.
I don't really want to broadcast my.
Oh, this is going out right after you guys
No, I
walk
know,
away.
So that's why I'm not going to.
So you can show me your name or ID. You can walk away.
We just want to talk.
I'm not going to talk to people who claim to be federal agents unless they can show me identification.
Okay, perfect. I love this. This is exactly right. If an officer, if somebody gets pulled over, if somebody gets an officer or some law enforcement shows up to talk to you, number one, you should always be quiet, right? That's what every lawyer out there ever says. But they should, before you do anything, they should fully identify themselves. Because how do we know who this person is? You know, Jeremy presumably has never met this guy. If I were in New Hampshire just visiting and hanging out and these guys stopped me and said, hey, we're FBI agents and we want to talk to you. Well, wait a minute. Do I know your FBI agents? I don't know all the FBI agents out there. So I agree. I agree. And I like the firmness in his tone. No, I'm not. I will keep recording. Let's continue.
You see our badges?
I need to see. Is your full name on that badge?
No.
I'd like to see something with your full name, or I'm not going to talk to you.
For you not to broadcast.
This will be going online as soon as you walk away.
All I want to do is talk to you about the post that was made. And if you
Well,
happen to be the one who made
I want to talk to you about you guys coming here. Say you make a salary of, I don't know what.
Okay. So I personally think that he's talking too much. Personally, it's my opinion. I'm not a lawyer, but I think that, but I will say this. He's not answering their questions. He's redirecting the conversation. And he's like, look, I want to talk to you about what you're doing here. Right. So this is not giving them information. Remember, whatever you say can and will be used against you. That's how police operate. Okay. So let's continue watching for a few more seconds and then we'll call it.
Below 100K? You guys making six figures? Factor in 50% expenses, overhead, maybe 100% expenses. Talking about burning a couple $100 an hour just here, let alone all the time you guys are spending to investigate something that you know is not against the law, right? Like you're familiar with. So then why would you come?
Because we wanted to make sure that there weren't any.
No, you're coming because you're part of a regime that does this kind of thing when you know laws aren't being broken. And that's an embarrassment, man. Didn't you guys read the Constitution? Do you not believe in America?
Okay, so I'm going to pause it right here, and I think we'll end the video because I don't want to play the whole thing. The link is in the show notes. You can go watch the whole thing. You know, I've actually got quite a bit to go through here, and so I don't want to play necessarily all the videos in full. But I want to play them enough to give you context. So effectively, what he just pointed out. Now, remember, Officer Chitwood, he said, man, all these bills, these parents are going to have to pay. We're giving you the bill because we had to investigate. And then Jeremy points out, he says, well, hey, wait a minute. You know, this is a First Amendment, yet you came out here and you are wasting resources. Not Jeremy. Jeremy didn't waste them. He just said something that I would think is inappropriate, but still within the boundaries of freedom of speech. But he said something that, you know, we don't like. So what? And then the FBI decides, hey, you know what? This is a good use of our resources. So to Sheriff Chetwood, if he's so concerned about all the money that has to be spent for all the, what do you say? There was like 54 calls in one day, 207 calls since the beginning of school. Since he's so concerned about the cost, what else is he doing to eliminate or reduce the cost? Do they go out and send officers when they don't need to? Do they do things that cost money up into the thousands of dollars that citizens have to pay for? The answer is yes, they do. And do they hold themselves accountable? No, they don't. What is Officer Chitwood doing? He's just being an ass. And I can say that because I'm not an officer being professional. But that's what he's doing. He's being an ass. Now, is it warranted? Maybe. There's an argument to be made that, hey, you know what? Kids, you know, if you call in a bomb threat, if you say, I'm going to go shoot up a school, that's a serious thing. And it does need to be, you know, people need to look into this. You know, law enforcement needs to, because if it's a real threat, we want them there to do something about it. Hopefully stop it, right? So I get it. I'm not denying the idea that we should necessarily not respond to things. But I am challenging and saying, do law enforcement apply the same concern about cost to their own selves as they do citizens, or are they just thumping their chest and making demand after demand after demand? And then are the citizens just saying, yeah, I don't want a school shooting. We should do something about that. We should, perp walk that kid. That's going to stop him. No, it's not. It's not. And the likelihood of a school shooting in Volusia County is very low. However, I will make the argument that it's still possible one could happen. Why? Because these situations, based on other observations that I've had over time, suggest to me that what ends up happening is the people that get caught in these nets, the people that we spend our resources and time on, are the people that are most out there, that are the most, they are the ones that didn't put in the effort to be more concealing about what they're doing. And they probably don't mean it in the first place. Or you might summarize all that and say, our law enforcement is going after low-hanging fruit. That's what they're doing. Low-hanging fruit that's rotten. And what I mean by rotten is, I don't mean the people are rotten. I mean the issue, what they're trying to stop was rotten. It was never ripe. Maybe that's not a good analogy, but I'm trying to work with it. But basically the low-hanging fruit in this particular case is going to be fruit that they didn't need to worry about, that wasn't going to materialize into anything serious. And so what is law enforcement doing to figure out how do we quickly discern between the two? Because we know that 11-year-old boys do and say stupid things. And we can do better in our society than perp walking a child and threatening all their parents, over something that is stupid. I agree. We want to stop any would-be shooters. That is a good goal. I like that goal. But I also recognize that in the pursuit of that goal, we cannot allow ourselves to be stupid. So has this happened before? Is this just, maybe somebody might say, well, DL, this is all kind of new, it's new territory. Actually, it's not. So here, remember this. Remember Eminem? I know he's like 52 now or something like that. And he's trying to rap and he's probably doing a pretty good job of it. He's got a skill. But remember he said things about Trump and the Secret Service paid him a visit. Years before that, he said things about George W. Bush. And guess what? Secret Service, they came to visit him over that. Right? Like, and when you look at the things that he has said, the music that he has made, the lyrics, they were pretty wild. They were way more like, if we think that every foul thing that someone says is a threat, man, this man was an outright terrorist. But he's not, because he has basically just channeled his 11-year-old boy into art, right? That's basically what he's done. He's taken the 11-year-old boy that laughs about things. In fact, I think there was a song where he mentions, like, I laugh about things. I'm not going to try to repeat his lyrics, but he basically said, I laugh about things that you shouldn't laugh about. Like, he admits it, and many of his songs were talking about this idea that the rhetoric coming from music should be blamed for what's happening in schools. And he talked about school shootings back in the 2000s, right? So fundamentally, I look at it and I say, we have always had an issue with people saying things that maybe they were better off not saying, things that they shouldn't have said. And we need to be mindful about how we approach these things. We need to be mindful with adults. If it's the case of somebody like Eminem, who was an adult when he penned these lyrics and then put them out on tape and then blasted them all over the place on CDs and the radio and concerts and whatnot, we need to be mindful and say, like, all right, what's the reality? Are people really going to go and do bad things because he was talking about it and making lighthearted jokes and saying things that were inappropriate, that offended our sensibilities? Well, the answer is no, that actually did not happen. That didn't happen. In fact, it rarely happens. In fact, I challenge you to find a school shooter that they initiated, like they were driven by rhetoric, solely by rhetoric. And you won't find one. What you will find are people who have mental disturbances. And those mental disturbances made it difficult for them, and I'm not covering for them, but it made it difficult for them to distinguish between what reality and, like hyperbole and all these other, rhetoric, basically. So that's what you're going to find. And the reality that we have is that our free speech, as far as I'm concerned, is under attack. It's under attack because you've got FBI agents going up to talk about tweets that aren't a crime. You have sheriffs that are perp walking or 11-year-olds, and people are cheering this on. And this will be our downfall. This will be our downfall. When you start criminalizing what people are saying and acting as if we have no capacity to distinguish when there's a true threat and when there's not. If I said, I hope you fall down a flight of stairs, that's not a threat. If I said, I will push you down a flight of stairs, that's a threat. Then the question becomes, is it a credible threat? If I'm joking with my buddy and we're hanging out at the house and we're having some beers and he starts giving me a hard time about something and I go, dude, you say that again, I'm going to push you down them stairs. Is that a credible threat? No, it's not. Like, more than likely. It's my friend. I'm not really going to push him down the stairs. Not if he's ribbing me. I mean, it's possible. It does happen. But the likelihood is low. The likelihood is that I'm just running my mouth. And that's what the purpose of free speech is about, is for you to say things, whether they're true or untrue. Now, you might say, well, DL, these are just a couple edge cases. And what I'm seeing is more and more edge cases. Once upon a time, it was Eminem. We're like, oh, well, he was talking about killing half of everybody, right? Gangster rappers, they talk about killing everybody. Sometimes they did get into conflict, right? So we went from there, but now we're talking about 11-year-old boys. Now it's not the rappers. It's not the artists that we're worried about. It's worried about the 11-year-old boys. It's worried about the people, the edgelords on Twitter who have a reputation for saying wild things. When you have a reputation for saying wild things, that means we can say probably not a real threat. And by the way, Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, just to their credit, they did come out with a post and they explained themselves and they said, look, we're not actually advocating for the shooting of a sitting president or any politician for that matter. They said, here is the rationale for it. Now, I still disagree with it. But again, it does fall within the purview of freedom of speech. That is absolutely important for this society. So why are we seeing this? Well, here, I think I've seen something that I want to point out. And I posted this a couple of times. Remember Alex Jones, who ran around mouthing off about the Parkland shooters and called them all fake and said that they were staging it, whatever. Well, I want you to look at something. So this comes from Politico. And what I really want you to focus on is not the headline, but the subline or whatever it's called. It says, until the political right purges this movement from its ranks, none of this ends. Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat for Connecticut, said after the verdict. So Alex Jones was ordered to pay almost $1 billion for his Sandy Hook lies that he made up. And he was saying a lot of lies. Like, I believe that the Sandy Hook actually was an event and that people actually died. Right. But that doesn't mean that he can't run his mouth and say things that are untrue and stupid and even vile and heinous. Right. Like, that's the point of free speech, is that we can say all kind of things. OK, especially as part of political discourse. That otherwise, if freedom of speech is only about the speech that which we like, then the First Amendment means nothing. It only means something when we're talking about offensive and terrible free speech or speech. That's when it means something. And I think what we have here is, I think this is telling. I think what this tells us right here, right there, what this, I can't even point my finger. I don't know how those guys, like, they get on there and they're like, see what it says right here, and they're reading. I don't know how they do that. I can't barely point to a single picture. But at any rate, I think what we have up here is There is a sentiment in this society that says we will run you out of town and do everything we can to destroy you for speech that we don't like. And we will even use law enforcement. And so what ends up happening is we blur the lines when there's a real threat versus when it's just somebody saying things. That's a problem. Why is it a problem? Again, we're going to end up capturing the people who were never going to harm somebody in the first place. And we will probably miss the people that do mean people harm. So we end up criminalizing people that shouldn't be. And we parade around, we perp walk them, we send the FBI out after them, even though we know or have some suspicion that the threat isn't credible, or that that we can deal with it in a different manner and still achieve good results. Because at the end of the day, this 11-year-old, he should not have made those threats, even in a joking manner. But at the same time, we as adults, we have to learn and say, is he being a dumb 11-year-old, or is he actually somebody that can cause that will cause harm to other people? Which one is it? And as far as I've heard from this sheriff, he has not, absolutely not, presented any evidence that this kid did anything other than make stupid jokes. And he perp walked an 11-year-old for saying stupid things. That should be unacceptable. We don't live in this quote unquote civilized society because nobody can agree on what that even means. For me, I say for the amount of conflict that the US engages in, there's no such thing as a civilized society. Right? How many countries have we invaded? How many conflicts have we been involved in? How many conflicts have we stirred up? I'm going to say we don't live in a civilized society. How many people have police killed that they shouldn't have killed? We don't live in a civilized society. How many dogs have police killed when they didn't need to kill dogs? We don't live in a civilized society. How many people are being perp walked because you've got officers who are on political steroids trying to puff their chest and show how great they are, when in fact they didn't need to go through all that? We don't live in a civilized society. But that doesn't mean that we can't value and cherish certain things that ideally would lead to the civilized society that we want. And the civilized society, from my perspective, would be one where people are not committing acts of aggression against other people, real acts. That's what I would consider a civilized society. And when we start seeing that lower, then and only then would I say we live in a civilized society. Until then, fire, fire, fire. We have a problem. And the firefighter, so to speak, is our First Amendment right, Second Amendment right, so on and so forth. Right? Those are the firemen. And the duty to ensure that we don't punish anybody more than necessary. Since Sheriff Chitwood wants to quote Supreme Court justices, how about Blackstone's ratio? Better that one guilty go free than 10 innocent be locked up. I'm paraphrasing. That's basically what it said. It's better that we let one guilty person get away than lock up 10 other people. But that's not what's happening because we live in a police state. And the only way to fix it is for citizens to recognize that this is not acceptable behavior. There are answers, and the way that we're approaching it is not the right way. There is a way to deal with 11-year-old boys that doesn't require locking them up in handcuffs and ankle cuffs and perp walking them and threatening the parents. There is a better answer than that. Because if that's all we got, we will never have a civilized society. All right. Let's see. I think that's all the comments that that I'm gonna let me look and see what else we got here. Let's see here. I don't appreciate the president using derogatory nicknames and condescending language. I don't want the sheriff or any other elected or unelected representatives doing it either. It's unprofessional. I agree. I do, like, I oppose a lot of this language. Like, even though I might say it is still your First Amendment speech, right? Like, you can say things, even offensive things that I don't like. I believe that part of our civilized society could be say, hey, you know what? You're a president. You need to speak more professionally. There's a time and a place for that, and it is not every damn time you speak. You're a sheriff. You need to be professional. You don't need to be referring to our children as cherubs in a pejorative manner. You don't need to be referring them to them as little bastards, as he did. That's unprofessional, and it makes me believe that he is incapable of administering justice within the purview of his authority. Right? Like, it makes me believe that he's just going to rush out and grab whoever he can so that he can parade them around and say, look at me. I saved everybody. I protected you. No, you didn't. You perp walked an 11-year-old, you bastard. All right. That's all I got today, folks. I'm getting worked up, and who knows, maybe I'll stop being professional. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this episode and found it informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, normally at 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. And make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you're there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. Last but not least, I want you to remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. Have a great week, folks. Catch you next time. But for now,